My name is Trevor Bryan. I'm an art teacher in Jackson, New Jersey. I've been teaching art for 17 years, mostly in elementary school. I want to thank Education Closet for sponsoring this conference. I think it's a great thing that they're doing. I especially want to thank Susan Riley and Brianne Gitcomb for all the work that they did to set this up. I am going to open up my screen so that we can get the presentation started. So give me one sec. All right. So today what we're going to be talking about is using viewing to support art students' writing. So you can follow me on Twitter at Trevor A. Bryan. I also write for a website called 4 O'Clock Faculty, which I started with a good friend of mine, Rich Chiz. We're going to look at two ways that we can use writing in the art room. One way is to use writing to respond to art, and the other way is to using art to foster elaboration and description in student writing. So the first one is more of a way of getting your students to respond to art in more of an art education sense. And then the second way of writing is still going to get them to respond to art and think about craft of art, but it's going to help them in their writing work for their English language arts classes. What we're going to focus on today is mood and pattern. I think that mood is the easiest way for any student or any novice viewer. It's even the way that I enter into any artwork. Whether it's a written text or whether it's a visual text, and then moods are set up through pattern. So we're going to be focusing on mood and pattern today, and I'll share with you how I think about that and how I use it. Here's a little quote that I wrote. I think of books as artwork, and I think because books are artworks, we can take the way that English language art teachers look at art and explore written text with their students. We can actually use a lot of their ideas and approaches to help art students to engage and work with visual texts. The way that I think about cross-curricular activities, I think about it more from a cognitive stance for cognition and metacognition than I do about content. And I'm sure that a lot of you have been focusing on content when you think about cross-curricular. I've sort of gotten away from content a little bit and feel that the art is a really good way of getting kids to think about the habits of mind they need to form to be academically successful. I just treat artwork as a text, just like books are a text, just like books are artworks. So what we're going to primarily use to do this work are the Axis lenses, which I created. They're very student friendly. We use these in English language arts classes as well as in the art room. So we'll explore these. Hopefully you have your copy handy. And this is the viewing structure that we use. So we're going to start with just viewing a little bit, and then I'll show you how we tie that into writing. This can be done without writing to get the kids started. For a lot of students, writing is going to be kind of a barrier. We can do this just through conversation. So this process that we're going to go over can be used through viewing and discussion first, and then when kids feel comfortable with the conversation and they feel confidence in viewing, they can use this to tackle writing. A lot of times we do this with on a carpet area, or we have the kids work with partners or in small groups to do this work, especially when we're starting. So the first part is just to list everything you see. I like to do 20 things. That's a good number. It allows kids to look at the picture just long enough that they're really pulling a lot of information out of it. And then we're going to determine the mood. We're going to use text evidence to support your thinking, and that's where the patterns come in. That information is also going to be thought of through the Axis lenses. So we'll use the Axis lenses to find the text evidence. And then mood and big ideas are often tied together. The mood, if we're looking at a picture of happiness or friendship. Um, that's largely going to be the big idea behind the picture, which ties into theme. And then I always encourage students to make connections. The connections that we normally make are the artwork to text to self. So let's get started. This image is from Peter Reynolds' book, The Dot. It's the first picture that I share with students, whether we're coming back from a break or whether we're being introduced to this viewing process. So if we think about listing 20 things, we want students to list anything that they see. So we can start with things as simple as an eye or a nose or white or lines. They can also list things such as paper, pencil, hair, eyebrows, arms, a girl, whatever they can come up with. And the nice thing about this is by listing everything and making it very concrete, by listing things that we see, every student has an opportunity to become part of the conversation. So we'd list by 20 things, and again, students can do this with partners. They can do it as a whole group. They can do it in a small group, however you want to do that. And then we're going to determine the mood. So students might come up with words such as sad or upset, or they might come up with words such as frustrated or distressed, depending on their vocabulary, and that gives both low and higher learners an opportunity to join the conversation and become part of the learning community. So now, once we have the mood determined, we're going to use our access lenses to support our thinking. So the question would be, how do we know that the mood is upset or frustrated? And we can start with the facial expression lens, and we can kind of say she has a little bit of a frown, her eyebrows are down or furrowed, her body language is upset, her arms are crossed, her back is turned away from her paper. The colors that are in the picture are a little bit gloomy, the bluish gray. And so these three things start to create a pattern of frustration, and that's what the patterns that I'm talking about. It's not a decorative pattern, it's more of an established pattern of the mood. So for instance, the floor tiles create a decorative pattern. However, if those tiles were rectangles, it wouldn't change our understanding of the picture or the meaning that we make from it. It doesn't give us any information. Her face, her body language, the colors all help us to understand the mood. So she's also far away from her paper. She's also alone. She's also not saying anything. So all of these things add to the idea that she's frustrated. We can zoom in on the paper, the blank paper, as a symbol of her frustration. If we wanted to, we can zoom in on the eyebrow. All right, so the big thing in this picture would be on her unhappiness or her frustration, or the big thing might be a little bit more abstract, that there's nobody to help her. All right, and if a girl, if a student were to do a written response to this picture, this might be a typical response that a student would write. The girl in the picture looks upset. I can tell because her face looks upset. Her arms are crossed and the colors are a bluish gray. This reminds me of the time my brother's friends were all on the trampoline and they wouldn't let me on. I felt just like this girl. So you can see in this response that the student identified the mood. They used text evidence to support their thinking, and then they were able to make a connection. This would be an example of an artwork to self connection. But this is all work that they have to do in their ELA classes, and using a picture is an easy way to get kids to engage in the forms of thinking that they need to do this work with text. And as I always tell the ELA teachers that I work with, if students can't respond well and meaningfully to a picture, it's very unlikely that they're going to be able to do that with text, which is just more complicated and harder to manage than pictures. All right, here's an example of another picture if we were going to make an artwork to artwork connection. This is a picture of Patricia Polacco from her book, Thank You, Mr. Faulkner. It's actually an autobiography, and you can see where these two pictures are developing or have established the same mood. Again, facial language, body language. You may be able to see the red in her cheeks. you know, and she's kind of alone in this picture. And again, her paper could be a symbol of her frustration. So we can also apply this to works of fine art. This is a picture by the artist Winslow Homer from the Princeton University Art Museum. And we could use the same concept where we list everything that we see, we determine the mood, we use the access lenses to find text evidence to support the mood, and then make a connection to this. And we could even make an artwork to artwork connection with the illustrations that we just saw. The reason that I start with illustrations is because they're very manageable for students. Even very young children can view them meaningfully and be able to pull a lot of information out of them and have a rigorous conversation around them. And then I will show them some fine art images, such as this one, which again have a very strong mood. So even very young children can engage the picture and really talk about it in a sophisticated way. And when we talk about the mood and then the pattern that supports it, what we're really talking about is craft. And the craft is going to be the craft of mood is utilizes the access lenses. So artists are going to craft the mood around facial expression and body language and how they place figures. And in this picture, there's a little bit of a symbol of hope that you know, that the outside is bright and shiny. However, this woman has her back turned to it, similar to how Vashti in that picture, that first picture we looked at, has her back towards the paper. All right, just like in this picture. All right, so another way that we can engage kids in writing is more of an ELA approach, where they would take a picture like this and think about elaborating and putting good description into their writing. So they could take this image, especially if they were familiar with it, and instead of writing just using text evidence, they would write it just as if they were trying to describe it, as if this were just a text. So I'll show you the next slide. So this would be an example of taking the picture and working on elaboration and description. So Vashti sat with her back to her blank paper, her arms crossed in frustration. Everyone had left. She was all alone. It was like a dark cloud had swept into the art room, swallowing Vashti whole. She looked angry, but really wanted to cry. And you could see that we had her body, her facial expression, her arms were crossed. So we used the body language, we used color, we used the far apart, close together alone lens. And then at the end, we used the facial expression lens. And then we could envision her wanting to cry. And if a student wrote this off of that picture for ELA, this would be a really strong writing. And you can see that by developing the mood and then elaborating on it through the use of the access lenses, it creates a really wonderful little paragraph. All right, and then here's an example of how a professional writer uses the access lenses to create mood. And that's what allows kids to envision stories in their head. This is from Most Wanted by R.L. Stine, which is from the Goosebumps series that a lot of your students probably read. Bree stayed close behind us. I knew she was worried about her parents. Her face was pale, her expression grim. She didn't bother to fix her hair. She didn't say a word. And again, if you go through this paragraph, you'll be able to pull out several of the access lenses. And so getting kids to use the access lenses, pull information out of pictures, put information into their writing are all really wonderful skills for the kids to develop. All right, here's another example of a first grader who wrote this, and then using the access lenses to really focus on mood, we're able to have the girl write this. All right, and again, we use sound. She heard thunder, Elizabeth stopped whistling, Elizabeth froze. And by using the access lenses, it sounds much more like writing. All right, I want to thank you for your time today. Hopefully you got a little bit out of it, both in terms of helping students to view art better, and then to write about art a little bit. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me either through Twitter at Trevor A. Bryan, or you can feel free to email me at trevorabryan@gmail.com. Thanks a lot. Have a great day.